Welcome back. Today here in the shop we're doing something a little bit different. We're back on the 47 Ford. One of the things that happens is things start to fail when a car has been not really run a whole lot, just started and pulled out and started and pulled back in, and that's about all that's happened with this car other than a brief run up and down the road a couple of years ago. So there's a few things we need to take care of that have failed on this car, so let's just get into it. I'm Mike and this is My Car Shop.
Working out of a 100-year-old refurbished barn, bringing 35 years of experience to projects considered beyond repair. Vision, creativity, and problem solving are essential tools in this place. Watch as we transform junk into polished metal miracles. This is My Car's Shop.
If you follow this project on the channel, you know that this car has sat for a long time without much done to it until right at the beginning of the pandemic. And when things locked up and shut down, I decided it was time to go ahead and get back on this car. We've come a huge way from where I was then. The front clip wasn't even on this car. It wasn't painted. There was no wiring in the car. It didn't have a fuel system. We've got all that, I won't say done, but it's all done. We've just got to finish it up. So I'm still intending to paint the grille and other things, but two things have happened on this car that, one of them has been that way pretty much since day one. The starter on this car is failing. It wasn't a new starter when I put it on. I should have, but I was just too cheap and threw one on there that a buddy of mine had. He wasn't using. And the other thing that's happened from just starting and stopping and starting and stopping, pretty typical of a small block Chevy. The plugs are fouled and we've got to take those out and get them cleaned up and put them back in. So we're going to get some of this work done so that this car runs a little better and starts, because half the time it really doesn't want to start and it's quite scary. We're going to get that done, and we're going to talk about a little bit of the reasons why these things happen and what you can do about it. So let's just stop the talk and get after it. As I mentioned, the plugs tend to get fouled on this car quite easily. I've noticed that with other small block Chevrolets I've owned, and some that my buddy owns as well, that the plugs just, for some reason, on a Chevrolet, seem to foul pretty easily if you don't keep these things out on the road. Maybe it's the type of plug I'm using. I don't know. It's got a good HEI supercoil on it. It's running a little rich, of course, but that's to be expected from all of the starting and stopping that it does. So it's not a major deal, but still we need to get these cleaned up. I'm just going to do these a couple at a time, making sure that I separate my wires so I don't have to count things over. Plug wire number 1 over there, plug wire number 3 down there, so that I don't get them confused. We'll go through and get these out and get them over in the sandblasting cabinet and get them cleaned up. I've had to do this in the years I've owned this car a couple of times. So I think I replaced them once, but so it means I probably have another new set of plugs around here cleaned up and ready to go, but I don't have a clue where they would be. So we'll just do these a pair. Oh yeah, they're blacker than Hades. It's going to be a little loud for you there because you're literally right next to the furnace, so I'll try to talk up. One of the things that I've done on this inexpensive Clark cabinet, it's a good little cabinet, but one of the things that I do is, back here in this corner, there is a valve or a dust control thing in there to help airflow in here so that things don't fog up. But the reality is, this is not a vacuum cabinet and it does fog up really badly. So I'm not doing it today because I'm not doing much sandblasting, but when I'm doing bigger projects, one of the things that I do is put a vacuum cleaner on that outlet back there so that it will draw fresh air through the filter here and out the cabinet, and it keeps this thing virtually spotless. The other thing I haven't done is there's supposed to be a fluorescent light that goes in here, or an LED light, and I haven't put one in. Brad actually donated this to the channel, and he had put this little flashlight on here, and that is just genius because that really shines the light on exactly what you're working on. and really makes a difference. So I'm not going to have the vacuum on this today, but there are episodes where you will see me using it that way with the vacuum on the channel, probably on the 47 Ford in other areas. One of these days I am going to get a light to put in here as well, but this little light here on this thing is just absolutely brilliant, pun intended. See the difference between a plug that's cleaned up and one that's fouled. So this plug is shorted out probably and missing some and not running like it should. This one's got all of that cleaned up now, and it'll work better. So we'll go ahead and get this one cleaned up, get it back in the car, and go from there. Of course, the other thing that you'll want to do is blow these plugs out really good. You blow them out real good to make sure you get all the sand out of them. And then I'm going ahead and put a little anti-seize on these things just to be sure that that they don't stick. It's a iron head engine, and of course they're steel plugs, but still better safe than sorry. Just provides a little bit of lubidobber to make sure those plugs don't get stuck or break or whatever. And because I mean, the car doesn't, other than following the plugs, these plugs have been in this engine. Well, I changed them once, but I'm going to say 10 years. So they could rust in here. They could, all kinds of stuff could happen. So I'm surprised I didn't put some anti-seize on them before, but I didn't. So it's just a personal thing, I guess. If it was aluminum head, I'd be a lot more worried about it, but better safe than sorry. So. Okay, lather, rinse, and repeat. So one of the things that I wanted to mention on this episode was how to test for a bad starter. About, I don't know, 75, 100 years ago, I bought a couple of these little inductive gauges from Snap-on. They're Blue Point gauges, and they're amp indicators. And you put this against a battery cable, and it will tell you exactly how many amps the battery is drawing, or the starter is drawing, to tell you whether it's bad. I know this one's drawing over 300 amps, which is way too much for what this is. It needs to be replaced. The starter's bad. Should only draw about 100 to 150 amps, I believe, on a fairly stock motor. Changes a little bit when you get into some really high compression. This is only a stock starter. I'm not using a high torque starter, but it's drawing way too much, which causes it. The battery has to be like 100% on its money for this thing to even reasonably start. Otherwise, it sometimes the starter sticks and the motor doesn't even turn over, and so it's dangerous because you got to disconnect the battery real quick. And I've been putting up with that for years, and I bought a starter about 6 months ago, just haven't taken time to get it done. So we're going to go ahead and get a starter on this thing. It's not a hard job, it's just one of those things I've just kept putting off because there's always so many other things I want to be doing. So one of the things I do like about this car is the starter is fairly easy to access. It's a lot easier than my A-body Mopars with headers, for example. We had just done the wiring on this, so the starter was rewired, and I could have changed. I didn't have a starter at the time where I would have changed it then because it's only two 9/16 bolts underneath there, but it's all good. We'll get her done. Remember what size that is over there. 11/32, I think. Chevy guys, remind me, what size is that? It's arguing with me. Getting the starter out is relatively easy. Take the bolts out, let it fall. Getting it back in again, that's more of a, well, yeah, it's a 5-letter word. Let's put it that way. There, it's out and broken, and I don't care because it's junk. Okay, so we will put the inner bolt in first because we have to do some measuring to find out what correct size shim we need, if we need a shim at all. And I'm not crazy about these with these vertical bolts, but they are what they are. So I like them from the ease of getting them in and out, but I don't like them from the standpoint of, I think I'm actually going to put this bolt in first because I can see what I'm doing, and then we'll go get the other one in. And if we have to shim it, we'll take one back out. Okay, that one started. Doesn't feel right. Maybe it is. Yep, it is. Okay, there we go. Very good. Now we got to do a dimension in here to find out. It needs to be an 1/8 inch between the flywheel tooth and the flywheel, and I got to go remember how exactly to do that because I don't remember exactly. But we've got to tighten up enough now. We should be able to get that dimension and find out if we need to shim this. It's really hard to see, but one of the things you have to do is check the clearance between the armature shaft and the teeth on the flywheel to make sure that there's clearance, and it needs to be a minimum of an 1/8 inch, and they give you actually an Allen wrench in the kit to check that. This case the starter needs 0 shims, so I think we're in good shape. I checked it and it's a little over 1/8 of an inch, and you can't get it any tighter than that. So I'll take you over to the whiteboard and explain this adjustment to you just so that you're clear on what that is, because I always try to teach what I know in the process of this. And I'm sure any Chevy guy knows this, but just in case, I don't want to make any assumptions about what people know. This is not drawn to scale, but my point is here, this is your flywheel, and this is your starter gear, and this is your armature shaft here. And they want you to measure between the teeth here and the armature shaft here, and that dimension should be about an 1/8 inch. They actually give you an Allen wrench in the starter kit for putting this in to check this. If it's too tight, you need to shim your starter down, because the further it comes down, the wider that gap is going to get. In my case, it's a little bit loose, but I would have to actually machine the surface to move it up anymore to get it up closer, because the starter is actually located down below the center line of the flywheel, and so if you move it up more, it gets tighter, and if you move it down more, it gets wider. But I'm a little over 1/8 of an inch in there, and I'm comfortable with that. As long as it doesn't do anything really funky when we go ahead to start it, it should be fine, because I can't make it any tighter than it is. I can't bring it up anymore without machining something, and I really don't want to do that. So the starter that was on there didn't have any shims either, so I didn't figure I was going to need any, but I just wanted to take you through this process of, this is the one downside to me of a Chevrolet, that you have to do this silly measurement and shim your starter. On a Mopar, put it in, bolt it down, it's done. Unfortunately, on a Mopar, it's a pain in the butt to get the starter on and off on a lot of these cars. I do like the fact that this Chevrolet is so easy. Well, let's see if we let out any magic smoke. It's all set to go, hopefully. Well, that's a good job done that I've been putting off for a long time. Can't believe how different it sounds. At first, when it cranked over, I thought there was something wrong with it because it sounded so different. But it's like when we fixed the special limited edition Holley Whistler carburetor and replaced that with a non-Whistler base plate. If you haven't seen that episode, it's pretty funny. It just sounds different, and it'll take a while to get used to it, but it starts much better now. This does have a trunk-mounted battery, so it's got a long cable coming up, and that starter was drawing too much amperage, so it sometimes would get scary when that starter would get stuck. It wouldn't turn the motor over, and it was engaged fully, and I'd have to run back to the back and whip open the trunk and disconnect the battery. And well, it was good for the heart because it got a lot of adrenaline going, and your heart does need a lot of exercise, but it was kind of hard on the shorts because it's hard to get those brown streaks out when that happens. But that's done, and it's a big step. It's also not missing anymore. It's running really good again, so I'm really happy with that. This is all just part of it. When you have this many cars and you're doing this many projects, you get things that get a lot of attention around here are the Oakland and the Challenger, and this car does not get the attention it deserves. It's just often pulled out of the way. It's not that I don't like the car, it's just other things are a higher priority right now. But I am going to be getting on painting this grille and getting the front end of this car together, because even if we're driving it without a hood, because I haven't even touched the hood for it yet, it's still blue. We'll drive it without a hood next year. It's really close to being on the road, and I do want to, after first of the year, focus on this and be able to at least get some plates on this and drive it to town once in a while. It's an awful cool car, and it deserves more attention than it gets. We have been hammering on the 70 Challenger. Old Stitches over there is coming together nicely. If you haven't seen that stuff, make sure you check it out. Dad wasn't able to be here this week, and so I worked on the 47 today instead of the Oakland because it was an opportunity to get this done. So that my biggest fear always was I pull this car outside and not be able to get it started and have a heck of a time getting it back in, and it's really not easy to find a place to push on this car. Fortunately, it rolls easy, but it's much better if it just runs under its own power. You have to be so careful with all of these parts and not damage something by pushing. So I think that's going to do it. I am hoping, planning to get the Forsyth Duster the front end of it way up in the air on the bay lift hoist and get some tall jack stands under there so that we can really start evaluating the first things we need to do. I know we need to get that torsion bar cross member fixed. When we were trailering the car home, the car was level on the torsion bars and a few bumps and poof, it actually ripped the torsion bar mount out because it was so thin under there. And that's definitely one of the first things we want to get fixed on that car so that we can begin the process of the preservation, not the restoration, but the preservation of that amazing old piece of drag racing history. Another reason for doing this is I want to take this car and put it in one of the other buildings, and there's another car that you've really not seen much on the channel at all that I want to put in here for a little while and do a little work on that as well. And I'm not going to say anything more than that, except maybe that's a little teaser about a little surprise of what's coming here in the next few weeks on the channel. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed this. Mostly, I hope you learned something. You know, the work isn't always sexy. Cleaning spark plugs, putting in a starter, it's all part of it. And as you know, the whole premise around here at My Car Shop is you just get to come and hang out in the shop for the day, and we're going to work on whatever we work on. Some of the work is amazingly fun. Some of it's just got to be done, and I want to share all of it with you so that you get a feel for what it's really like to work in a shop like this. All right, we're on the Face thing. We're on the Instagram /My Car Shop. And don't forget the most important thing around this shop.
Rah!